Right, good morning, everybody. We're talking about the horror and terrifiedness of addendums and reinstatements and annexures. So let's just kick off. I'm going to share my screen again. I'm recording this for the benefit, really, of Gary, who's traveling all the way to Harties again. It's funny, though, that Gary only gets to travel there on Friday afternoons. Seems a bit strange for his appointments. But guess you got to get your leave where you can find it. Right, so let me just, I'm going to reshare that screen. Okay, thank you. Can you see that? Yes. Right, I just want to remind you before we kick off on this, the top of your offer to purchase has been modified slightly. Your name there, that agent, that's you, remember? So please don't send out a blank offer to purchase because then I don't know who to pay the commission to. And I never get reminded, so I owe hundreds of people commissions. Okay, not really, but you need to put your name there because you need your FFC number. And if you are not a full status agent, then of course you need to have your mentor's name. And I think in your mentor, in the capacity as mentor at the moment, other than a very few select people, you're probably going to be using me as your mentor. Okay, so that's the first bit of exciting news. The second thing is, where do you find your FFC number? Well, it's on the bottom of your FFC certificate that you get from the EAB, and you'll notice that there are two numbers. There's one here, this reference number here. That's the EAB reference number. You can only use that for dealing with the EAB. Okay, your actual FFC number has got the year before it. So you'll see this one here is 2022, 21, 12, 5, blah, whatever. Okay, so your FFC number will start with 2021, and very soon you're going to be using the 2022. Okay, so please add those in. While we're talking about FFCs, we have renewed our FFC for the company and for myself. So you guys you can start paying, and you need to renew your FFC before the 31st of October. So please don't let it slip. They charge you 200 and something rand per month if you don't get it right. Right. Now we are sharing the screen, and I can see you all looking at what I'll be almost mess on my screen here. But yeah, okay, so what's an addendum and what's an annexure and what's a reinstatement agreement? This has come up in this week for the, it comes up regularly, but I mean, this week it was quite a rush on them. So I thought I'll just tell you. As an agent, you're going to have to deal with them, and you don't have to do these things. You have to do one of them. I will do the rest of them for you. You only have to tell me what's going on so I can help you. Please don't say, ask the attorneys to do an addendum or an annexure for you. What happens is, remember, you're typically dealing with a conveyancing secretary. She's not empowered to make any decisions or do any legal work whatsoever. She is a secretary. She doesn't have any law degree per se. So she won't do it. So if you say to her, oh, I need an addendum, she's going to say, absolutely, I'll help you, and then pass it on to the conveyancing attorney who's got a pile of work, or he's on holiday, or he's whatever they do, and they're not going to do it speedily. Okay, so most times it's much easier to do it yourself. So if you're a fully fledged agent, you're well competent enough to do an annexure or an addendum or a reinstatement agreement. But if you have any doubt about it, just send me the details and I'll do it for you. I've got nothing else to do all day, and I'm waiting, and I love drawing up these agreements. Okay, so what is it? Let's have a look. Can you all see this? The difference between annexures and addendums. Who knows what the difference is between an annexure and addendum? Come on, Shanae. I see Shanae cannot help herself here. Tell us, Shanae.
They're similar.
They're similar. Well, they are similar because they're both pieces of paper. But other than that, they're not similar. Come on. Nobody else knows.
It's a condition to the offer to purchase.
Which one? Okay. Let's have a look.
Addendums are, hello. Addendums are the additions to the offer to purchase, and then annexures are sort of like laws that govern the offer to purchase. I hope I'm right. But addendums are additions to the offer to purchase.
Okay.
that you are adding. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well done, Chris. That's great. So the
There you
bottom
go.
line is that the two things, they're not interchangeable. So let's talk about annexures. Yeah. Here we talk about annexures. Annexure means supplement or an appendix to the agreement. And a typical one is where they expand clauses. So if you have in your agreement that says that I will provide you with a loaf of bread every day for the rest of the week if you buy this property, and then an annexure to that might say such loaf of bread will be 12.50 and delivered by truck. So it expands on a detail that's already in the agreement. Okay, so in our agreements, a typical one is the FICA annexure. So that says that the domicilium of the parties is recorded in annexures, in the FICA annexures. And then if you look at the FICA annexures, you've got the person's name, their ID numbers, their marital status, what FICA they're supplying, and all of those documents. And what's quite interesting is that the FICA documents per se probably don't have to be signed by a buyer and seller. Now, please don't take away from this that the buyer and seller don't have to sign annexures. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in the case specifically of a FICA document, the FICA for the seller and the FICA for the buyer have got a place for both to sign, but it's not only necessary. I suspect in terms of POPI, it's probably not so lacquer. So you don't really want to share those two documents with them. And for good practice as a professional property practitioner, you probably don't want your buyer and seller talking directly to each other at any time, other than once they've bought the house. Because as soon as those two oaks start talking, you are effectively cut out of the deal, and they make up stuff that is, let's just say, unpalatable. Okay, so if an offer to purchase refers to commission, then an annexure can detail the commission. Now, some offers to purchase say that there is a commission payable, and then there'll be an annexure to the agreement that says the commission annexure, and the commission will be paid by the buyer or the seller, and it'll be X and Y, and the amounts and the VAT and everything will be detailed. So it is an expansion of an existing contractual agreement. Okay, does it make sense? So a good example of a annexure is that if you look at our agreement, can you all see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Clause 12 of our agreement talks about voetstoots, and it says that blah, 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 the seller knows of defects that are not visible, blatant, and did not bring them to the attention of the purchaser in Annexure A here too. Okay, so that is an annexure, and it expands it. So if you look at Annexure A here too, it is the condition report. So it makes sense. It is an expansion of something they're referring to. So you've disclosed your defects, and if you haven't disclosed them in Annexure A, then I don't know what they are. And if you go to Annexure A, it's attached to the document. And in this case, you have to have both people signing it. And that's why don't tell me that both don't have to sign. I was only referring to the FICA documents. But in this case, both of them have to sign it. Okay. Are there any questions about Annexure? Easy, it's like simple, like falling off a log. Okay, every single offer to purchase that you deal with has got at least 3 annexures. Who are they? What they call? Does anybody know? Come on.
It's the buyer and the seller and the disclaimer form.
Yeah, the FICA for the buyer, FICA for the seller, and the disclosure form. At least you will have those 3. And you can have many more, because you can have some of them that say the certificates that require, the compliance certificates is a separate annexure. Another annexure can be the invasive species annexure. Another annexure could possibly be the commission clause. So you can have many annexures. And our standard agreement that is on DMS for you to download has got annexures A to thousands. And I would prefer to have all of the contractual obligations detailed in one document, and that is the main agreement, where the annexures only are the FICA documents and the requirement by the EAB that you have a separate disclosure. Everything else I prefer to have in the agreement, and it's personal preference. It's not really, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that when you have, we're trying to sign documents remotely, and that to have annexure A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, it gets a little bit, let's say, tiresome trying to coordinate at once, but rather than having a simple 8-pager. So if you leave out one annexure in our instance, it's not too bad. If you leave out the commission annexure in a big agreement, bad. Okay. So are there any questions? At least 3, that's answers. And addendums are changes to an OTP. So an annexure is an expansion of a common thing, where an addendum is, sorry, I just want to let some people in. An addendum is an additional, come on. Hey, my mouse is going here. Is the additional material or a change to an OTP. So addendums modify an agreement. Annexures explain an agreement, if I can put it like that. So if an offer to purchase is about to expire due to the effluxion of time or a suspensive condition not being met, you then can do an addendum to fix it. But what's the trick with addendums? Addendums are like doctors. They can only act on living beings. They cannot act on the dead. Okay, what do I mean by that? Is that you cannot have an addendum to an agreement that doesn't exist. That makes sense. Okay, so you can't have an addendum to the agreement changing the purchase price of a sale if the sale agreement isn't valid. So annexures and addendums are living modifications or living expansions to an agreement, a live agreement, an active agreement. So what do I mean by that? So let's have a look. It has to be before it happens. So what do I mean by that? I'm saying if an offer to purchase is about to expire because of time, so you give the person a date and says you have to sign this agreement before the 13th, after which it does, and it's the 13th. You can't wait until the 14th to say, okay, we're going to modify that date. You either have to do it before the 13th or you're redoing the agreement. And if you get the right attorney, or let's say the wrong attorney, he's going to make you re-sign the whole agreement, because he's going to say to you, you cannot revive. You are not Dr. Frankenstein, who was the creator of the monster. And the monster wasn't called Frankenstein, remember? But you cannot revive this dead thing. You have to redo it. Okay. So addendums make changes to existing contractual obligations, like tenancy, or a good one is if you say to the guy, I see that the bond clause is about to expire, you need a bond, and the buyer says to you, I need another week, I'm getting it, I'm just comparing prices, I'm going to get it for you. You can then decide to extend that period by agreement with the buyer and seller, and you actually need an addendum. An addendum just says that, I know we've signed this agreement, and I know it says the 13th, but here are we agreed to extend it to the 14th, and that must be done beforehand. Now, our agreement makes provision for the agent, that's us, to extend that in writing. But in the true sense of the word, many attorneys won't accept that. They can say, they'll say to you, it's not good enough to just say that I extended in a letter. They're going to want an addendum signed by both parties, and it is correct, because because remember what a contract means in law. Contract is a meeting of minds, and if you unilaterally extend a bond clause for the benefit of the purchaser, and the seller doesn't agree with it, there's no more meeting of minds. And you can say, yeah, but you agreed to allowing me to do that. But I think you will fail with that eventually. You know, you could fail depending on which judge you get. Okay. So most offers to purchasers have how many addendums? Well, if you're lucky, 0. Because you don't want addendums. You don't want changes to the offer to purchase. And this is where you as an agent need to get experience, because you can make your life living hell and turn it into an addendum nightmare by putting stupid stuff into the agreement. So if you come to here in the front of your agreement and you decide that you're going to give this guy a deposit due date, you're going to give him 2 days to pay the deposit, and the bond approval date, I'm going to give you 1 week to get a bond. You're then you have created a death spiral for your own agreement, and you'll never fulfill those conditions. So the very first thing you're going to do is start doing addendums to get the thing back into life. So you need to do the addendum to extend the bond approval date. So bond approvals, give yourself 30 days, give yourself 40 days. Give yourself enough time. Okay. And especially for deposits. Don't tell me that the deposit has to be paid on signature hereof. Because nobody's got a pile of money in his pocket that he can pay 100,000 rand to you upon signature. It's a nonsense thing. So give the guy a reasonable amount of time, a proper week to pay a deposit. You know what, you want to put pressure on people, but you also don't want to cause your own agreements to fail. So the sellers are going to want you to have deposit immediately payable in 1 day and the bond approved in 1 week. And it's your job to push them out a bit and say, look, we need to be reasonable. You know, it's interbank changes take time. We need to release the money. Let's give the guy 14 days for the deposit and 30 days for a bond. Why? Because you don't want to have these calamities and you don't want the agreement to fail because of your own fictitious numbers that you put. You know what would fail. Because remember, if people get buyer's remorse, so they sign the agreement and they're all lucky and happy, and then they get home and they go, oh my God, what have I done? Why am I buying this thing? And then I go, oh, I wish I could get out of it. And then if they see, but I've got to get a bond by tomorrow. Well, I can't get a bond by tomorrow. Ah, it's stupid. God doesn't want me to have it. Well, I want you to have it. So we're going to give you enough time and we'll talk about that. Okay. So back to that one. Right. So you've got an annexure, which is a expansion of an agreement. You've got an addendum, which changes things in a living agreement. But now Anton has gone off on a long weekend and he comes back on Monday and he realizes that his bonds were due on Friday. He phones the seller frantically, have you got your bond? And the guy says, yeah, I'm just waiting for a letter from the bank to confirm it. And that means in real language, he hasn't got his bond yet. So now you can phone the seller and you say, listen, the guy missed his bond date, but he's got the bond actually, and we'll have it tomorrow. It's all good. We'll just change that date on the agreement. The problem is that the agreement is dead. So we need something else then. We need this out here. Reinstatement agreements. And reinstatement agreements are quite simple. Annexures and addendums can't act on something that's dead. But if an OTP becomes null and void and unenforceable in law, you can't use an addendum to fix it. Please just bear with me. You need to talk to Linda and I or your attorney fast if any of those dates are approaching. Now, a good agent knows when his dates are due. He knows when his bond's due, and a week before that, he starts panicking. Not the day before, because the day before you can do nothing. You need a week at least to shout and scream and jump up and down and drive in your car and get the guy to sign something that the bank wants. And the bond approval and when's the commission due date and when is the house that he's meant to be selling going to get sold and has it been sold? All of those dates you need in a big calendar in front of you on the roof above your bed so that you can lie there at night panicking about them and making the appropriate things. You cannot act after the time. Okay, it makes sense. So what kills these agreements? The one thing that kills an agreement stone dead is a suspensive condition. Suspensive conditions by their very nature, by their wording, are if this agreement is not, if your bond is not approved on X time or date, this agreement becomes null and void and is no longer enforceable. It's your agreement. You've written it and presented it to the buyer and seller. So if you then go on a long weekend and come back on the Tuesday and say, I know the bond was due on Monday, but we got it on Wednesday, so it's lacquer. It's not lacquer. You have built a terminal event into your own agreement. You have to address it before the time. So bonds kill agreements and the sale of the second property. So if it's a subject to a sale, if those two things don't happen timeously, your agreement's dead. And it cannot be revived, and you move on and you try and sell the property to somewhere else. Another thing that kills it is this effluxion of time. So when you look at this one here, and that's that time and expiry date. And I fight with you guys all the time about that, because I get an agreement, and over here at the bottom of the page, this agreement must be signed in full on or before this date here. There, on or before. Now it's critical, man, because what you guys don't understand, if you don't put that in, it's dead. Because you cannot enforce it. Because anybody that says, oh, sorry, Mr. Buyer, pay your money, I'm suing you for commission because you didn't fulfill your obligations, you're going to say, we don't have an agreement. It lapsed, it's gone. And there's nothing you can do about it. You've got to put a time in there. And that time has got to be after the signature of the two parties. So the buyer signs on the 13th, seller signs on the 14th, and that date on or before mustn't be the 12th, it must be the 13th. So you need to give a person a reasonable time to sign, and you don't want to give them too much time because you want to keep pressure on, but you don't want to give them too little. So if the seller is a trust, and it's a family trust, and there are 14 members of the trust, and the trust members are in the United States, Taiwan, and Japan, and the one guy's in Antarctica on a 6-month scientific exploration, then it's unwise to put an expiry date there of 2 days. I mean, you're going to get it, and your agreement will die certainly. So then don't waste the paper. You know, just say to that, well, wait. Okay, so what date you put in there? If you're presenting a cash offer, you give the guy today, Mr. Seller, you said you wanted a price. I got the price. It's cash. Sign it now on presentation. If you don't sign it, I'm taking the money somewhere else. If ever there's complexities of ownership and there's a trust or a property or you're not sure, give the guys 2 days or a week. And if the guy's in Antarctica, move on because you're never getting an agreement from him. Okay. So, no, don't look at that one. I was so excited. You're trying to get ahead of the time there. Okay, so expiry of the time and suspensive conditions, that will kill your agreement. Now, if your agreement gets killed, what do you do about it? Okay, well, let's have a look. So let's just go to the reinstatement agreement. It's very simple. Let's say here's one here that's happened. So what you do, all of these things look the same. They just got a different name. So the addendum, or the addendum and the reinstatement look the same. What they do is they refer to an agreement. So you say, Mr. Seller was X of this guy, the buyer was this guy, and the property was this cat here, and all of these people got into an agreement signed on that date. Okay, so we establish in time and space, what are we talking about? Because remember, the agreement's dead. So you can't use the agreement. So you're saying, okay, but there was an event. This event happened between these people on that such time. Now, although the clause 16 of the agreement failed because the guy didn't get a bond, the buyer and the seller herewith agree to reinstate that agreement in its entirety and proceed with the transfer. That's very simple. And that agreement then becomes part of this offer to purchase, which is then revived, okay, by some miracle. But it's a separate agreement. It's actually an offer to purchase in its own right. And it's got certain things in it, like the name, and probably should have the amount in as well. But the attorneys will guide you, okay. Are there any questions about reinstatement? Okay, so if you hit a flatty and you don't get your bond and the agreement's dead, you speak to me immediately. I'll speak to the buyer, the seller, we'll build a reinstatement agreement and get everything back on track. Simple, simple. A addendum to agreement of sale, you've seen what the annexures look like, we know what they are, but the addendum to agreement of sale, you'll see here that it's got a very similar kind of, it's got a very similar start. It refers to an agreement. It refers to a buyer, it refers to a seller, and it refers to a property, you see, and the date of the agreement. So it says, guys, we have an agreement, but remember, this is the addendum. So it says, we have an agreement. The agreement is alive, but now this has happened. Now the parties agree to amend the above agreement or change it in such a way. And this is what we then detail. We say, which clause are we trying to change? And we say here, look, there is a clause, this one here called existing tenancy, and you'd say, what's wrong with it? And you say, in that clause, it was signed with to be announced for the tenant. Now, that's completely unpalatable. You can't enter into arrangement where you say, okay, Rob, I'm going to buy your car, and the price will be to be announced. You know, like, what kind of arrangements is that? How do I announce? When are you going to announce this? And how does it get announced? So you have to announce this. So please don't put stuff like that in your agreement. TBA means nothing. Okay. So, but what you do now is now you have to expand on that. So what do we do with the annexure? I mean, the addendum. We say both parties herewith confirm that the clause will now read as such. And you say what the clause will read as. The seller will give tenancy to this gentleman called Clement. And in all other terms and conditions, the agreement will remain unchanged and be lawfully enforceable. And remember that this is done while the agreement's still alive. So we agree, Malala and Anton, I'm buying your cat. Your cat's awesome. Oh, by the way, we've signed the agreement, but Malala, we just want to change one thing. The cat must come with its collar. So can we agree in clause 42 of the cat sale agreement that collar was not included? We now agree to include the collar, and it becomes an addendum to the agreement. Okay, it's like so easy. So that's the addendum, fixes details in an alive agreement. If your agreement dies, you do a reinstatement agreement, and the reinstatement brings it back to life. And the annexures are just the stuffs that you have in your agreement anyway. Are there any questions? Dead quiet. Easy. Did you not see those things? So for the last 20 minutes, I've been drawing on the screen and nobody could see them. Is that true?
We did see.
Oh, did you see them? Okay. Cool. No questions. Either there's two questions. As a teacher, you get taught this. If you ask your class, do they understand? And nobody knows, nobody says anything. Either you are magnificent and you are the first teacher in the history of the human race to have conveyed information in such a spectacular and magnificent way. Or option two is that your people you're trying to teach don't understand a word you're saying because you're terrible at your job and they can't understand a word you're saying. And so what I'm hoping is that you guys are gearing up for Friday and it was easy and you all know it anyway. So no questions. Have a nice day. Go and sell some houses and well done on a good month so far.
Thank you, Anton. We did understand.
Thanks, love.